Greetings and salutations. Well, this is my review of the new Afrika Korps source book for the 4th edition of Flames of War, produced by Battlefront. So, on the front cover here, you get their typical battle scene taking place in the Middle War in the desert, and then on the back, it gives you a quick story, and of course you get some of the models in there. So let's take a closer look at it and see how that comes out. So of course, like the British Desert Rats book, which you can, if you have not seen it, you can catch it on another video. It opens up where you get to see the European map, and again, really, I think this is geared for those who are new to World War II, or maybe they heard, yeah, there have been some fights in the North Africa. What's going on? What's the big picture? So for people who are big picture thinkers, this is a great introduction here. And of course, combining the paintings with actual historical photos, that's really cool. Of course, your table of contents. And then when you go through, it gives a bit of a background of the Afrika Korps, and you can, of course, get to see, once again, pictures of Battlefront models. Again, before this Afrika Korps book came out, Flames of War players, they had the North Africa source book, which was for the 3rd edition, and there was also the book called Africa, which I have, and I still keep it because it is a great resource for things like paints and how-tos and whatnot. But for us here, again, this is really meant for the new person. Although if you are not a Flames of War newbie like myself, but you never did the Desert War, this is not a bad introduction. This is a fairly easy, simple way to get in. So, of course, you get the German special rules in there, including the rules for Tigers, which Tigers were not there at El Alamein, but they were there for the Battle of Tunisia. So it gives you a quick background, again, the successes of the German Blitzkrieg, and it also gives you a timeline chronology, which I like. That's a nice plus. It talks about the war in the desert, the going back and forth with the British and the Italians, and the Germans, but also, when I say the British, it's not just, you know, the island nation of the United Kingdom. You also have to take a look at the British Empire. Also, you need to think about Australians, New Zealanders. There were quite a few South Africans. There were Indians. So there were quite a few people involved in this. So it talks a bit about the fall of Tobruk in 1942. It gives you, a nice map, and again, it gives you the big picture about how close Rommel was to getting into Alexandria. If the Germans had gotten the Suez Canal, that was going to make things a bit sticky for the British in terms of getting their supplies, because being able to go from the east to Europe, being able to go through the Suez Canal, go through the Mediterranean to get to England, that was the way they wanted to go. But if the Suez Canal fell to the Germans, then that meant British shipments would have had to go around the Horn of Africa. And more than likely, that was going to take a whole lot longer. Now, of course, the thing you have to ask is, well, all right, Rommel's taken Tobruk. You see that the Germans are pushing. Why in the world did the British decide, the British 8th Army decide to stand and make the stand at a place called El Alamein? Well, it's most likely because of this geographic feature called the Qattara Depression. That was something that it was a bit of a rough spot for vehicles to get through. And most likely that was a place that the British would be able to defend with a thinner line and thus take their forces and concentrate them more there. In moving on, it goes and specifies, it focuses on the Battle of Alam al-Halfa in August of 42. You get the maps. Battle of Medellin in March of 43. So at this point now in 43, The fortunes of the Afrika Korps are not that fantastic. They've been taking losses. They're not getting the supplies that they used to because they're still getting their supply. They have to get their supplies by ship, pretty much. So now the Afrika Korps is fighting for its life. Then you talk about know your panzers. So again, it gives you the different variations of the Panzer III and the Panzer IV. And you also had the Tiger, but again, the Tiger was coming more toward the end. So your main tanks were the DAK, the Deutsche Afrika Korps. It's going to be your Panzer IIIs and your Panzer IVs. So that's pretty cool in and of itself, and it gives you the stats on the thing. Then it talks a little bit about the Deutsche Afrika Korps. It tells you who was in command at what time, and then talks about, you know, the makeup of the 15th Panzer Division, the 21st Panzer Division, the 90th Lich Africa Division, which is the Light Africa Division. And then you go into the Afrika Korps Force, which you could take a Panzer IV tank company, a Panzer III tank company, or maybe an Afrika Rifle company if you are into infantry. Which, you know, again, the desert was not easy on anybody, but, you know, I would imagine on infantry it was probably tougher because moving around was a bit more difficult. So here you got to focus on one of the panzer regiments that belonged in the 15th Panzer Division, and that's Panzer Regiment 8. And then it just shows you the breakdown from the regiment to the 2 battalions, and then it shows you the companies that are involved. And what's really nice is that they show you how many of what model panzers made up that particular company. So if you wanted to model your Deutsche Afrika Korps forces after an actual historical unit, this is not a bad way to go. So here we have a Panzer III tank company. So if you wanted to go with that, they call it a light tank formation, which I think is interesting considering the Panzer II is definitely a light tank. But again, World War II you were seeing a change in armor. And it was a race as to who had the better tank, the better armor, the better guns. And Panzer IIIs were starting to see the beginning of the end. The Panzer IVs were starting to rise at this point. So again, you'd take an HQ and 2 compulsory units. So you have Panzer III, and you can choose a Panzer III or a Panzer IV platoon for that, and then off you go. Now, Panzer III Tank Company options. So again, they give you the information that you would find on the cards, gives you the points values as well, and it includes the stats there. What kind of gun? Now, they don't make the distinction between the Panzer IIIL, the Panzer IIIJ, the Panzer IIIM, or the Panzer IIIN. They don't. They've done away with that because I think in game terms, that wasn't going to change anything for them. So you can see the stats, the range, the rate of fire when it's halted, when it's moving, the anti-tank value, and the firepower. And then, of course, the special notes as far as, okay, there's heat, which in this case, if your shot is going beyond 16 inches, normally you'd get a +1 to the enemy armor in terms of penetration. Heat negates that. So that makes it a hot round, so to speak. All right, I'm not being paid for my jokes. But anyway, so you have the option of the Panzer III mixed platoon. So you do have choices as far as how you want to arm your Panzer IIIs. So that's really cool. And again, they go into detail, which is really cool for the neophyte. Panzer Regiment 5, same idea. Okay, from the 21st Panzer Division, May 42. And then here you have your Panzer IV Tank Company. Now what's kind of interesting is that you have only the options to take Panzer IV, except for the Panzer IIs, which, you know, on a head-on confrontation with, say, Crusaders or Grants, the Panzer II is just not going to do well. So really, it's great for trying to hit from the flank. Go around flanks, hit from the rear, hit from the flanks, that kind of thing. Panzer IV Tank Company HQ, again, they give you the option if you want a long 7.5 centimeter gun or a short 7.5 centimeter gun. There are differences in there. And then, of course, it talks about the 90th Light Africa Division looking at the Schützen Regiment 200. So often German players hear the Grenadier, but at this point in the war, the riflemen were not Grenadier, they were Schützen. So you have the Africa Rifle Company, and if you notice, again, you get platoons, and then you also get the 50 millimeter anti-tank gun. It says 5 centimeters, but to me, I still think in terms of millimeters. The African Rifle Company, the Rifle Platoon, okay, the 5 centimeter Tank Hunter Platoon, you have the Light AA Platoon, again, that's great. So those are your compulsory platoons for your formations. Now we can look at support units, and of course the first one they put up there is the Tiger 1. Okay, the reality is that there weren't that many out there. The ones that did get there, some were lost because of mechanical breakdown, but yeah, they proved to be a real problem to the Allies. And then of course you have a map here of one of the later fights that the Tiger was involved with in Tunisia. Then we also have the Martyr Tank Hunter, the 7.62 centimeter. For those people who don't know, that is from captured Russian crash boom guns. Yes, yes, the Germans had no problems taking those and mounting them on the, I believe it's the 38T chassis, and thus be able to make a mobile tank hunter unit out of it. Then, of course, the dreaded 88. That is just absolutely essential. You also have your recon cars as well. I have not played the recon part yet for Flames of War, so I don't know how the rules really have changed. You have a Panzer II observation post for your artillery, which you have your 10.5 centimeter artillery. Here you have the 15 centimeter Lorraine Schlepper artillery battery, which again, they mounted the 150 millimeter gun on a French chassis. They had to do something with those captured French tanks. Then, of course, the Ju-87 Stuka dive bomber flight. I really like the pictures. They make the pictures very dynamic. And then, of course, you know, painting. How do you go about painting your tanks and vehicles? They show you the kind of paints. I don't think they're working with Vallejos anymore, but they end up coming up with these names, which I understand why they do it. They're trying, you know, they're trying to sell product, and that's understandable. But to me, that's one of the reasons why I held on to my first edition Africa book, because it tells me what Vallejos I need. Because it's easier for me to get Vallejos than to get these. Afrika Korps markings, again, where do you put the markings? What do the markings mean? And then, of course, it tells you about how to paint the infantry as well. And with that, they also, you know, the aircraft, what to paint the aircraft, what colors. And then, of course, they give you the basing guide for their infantry, their gun teams. So it just shows you how it looks. And yeah, I have to say, it's nicely done. And then, of course, okay, that's nice. Where do you go from here? So this is a nice little advertisement if you want to expand your force. This is a nice expansion. I don't have it as of yet, but again, you look at these. I'm kind of hesitant to get the Tigers, you know, for a mid-war force fighting in Tunisia, but yeah, the temptation might be there to do it if I go and fight in Tunisia. So anyways, here it is. The book concludes with a map of the furthest extent of the Axis conquest in 1942, and if you think about it, that's pretty extensive for a war. Well, anyways, at this point, this is it for this book. I hope it's given you guys some insight. Do I think that this book is complete in terms of, does it have everything for the Afrika Korps? No. No, I think there's some stuff there that's definitely missing. I don't know if they're going to release a later thing. I think this is probably a book that is a get you by while we get things started in the 4th edition, because they are focusing for a year on the mid-war. Then the following year, like next year, they want to go to the Eastern Front. Yay! And do places like Stalingrad and Kursk. Well, hey, I hope that this benefited you, and take care, and God bless.